Welcome to Midway Minute, everybody. I am Scott Correll. As always, we have Kevin Kadick, the founder of Midway Minute, and we bring in today longtime Bears writer Arthur Arkush. Art, welcome to Midway Minute. Thanks for being with us.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Now, obviously, as a longtime Bears writer, you've seen the ups and downs and a lot of downs, especially recently. The Bears are in a pretty precarious position. They're a team with no direction. As the draft is at this point a couple weeks away, what would you do if you were the Bears?
Yeah, I think that's an apt way to put it, as hard as it may be to hear. They are a little bit rudderless right now. And I think if you want to be a glass half full type, as it relates specifically to the draft, that means the draft is kind of their oyster. I don't know that they could go in a wrong direction per se, because they have needs everywhere. I think what's problematic, guys, is that their biggest needs are at the premium spots. They're pretty well set at the second tier positions that don't cost as much in resources to fill, the off-ball linebacker and running back and safety. But you look at the premium spots: offensive tackle, wide receiver, cornerback, and of course the elephant in the room, they still need a long-term quarterback option. A lot of directions they can go. It does seem to me, though, that they've kind of put their eggs in the Andy Dalton basket for this year, for better or worse. So it might be most prudent to surround him, go get that offensive tackle, get that wide receiver, eventually get that corner, and kind of try and knock off those premium needs the best they can.
How much pressure do you think is on Ryan Pace to really kind of nail this draft? And do you think even nailing this draft is something that's possible with the capital they have?
I think he's under immense pressure. I don't know. I'm not privy, unfortunately, to those conversations inside Hallis Hall. I thought certainly that his job security should be very, very tenuous after the way last season ended, and nothing was a slam dunk for him. And then it seems from the direction they've went that they're all in for this year. So that would obviously ramp up the pressure if you look at the moves that they have made. I do think that they're in an okay spot. Obviously, you'd rather be picking earlier than 20th. You'd rather have more picks overall. But when you compare it to recent years, I think Pace has to feel refreshed with what he has to work with this time around. And then you look at the fact that it seems to be a solid draft aligning with where their biggest needs are, it appears. And then, of course, just another elephant in the room. Every team is dealing with such a layer of uncertainty this year, given the unique elements involved in the scouting and the pre-draft process. So we'll see whoever had the best foresight, had the best, the ways to prepare for that. And those are the teams that I think are going to make out the best here.
So I think like one of the good things is like Pace did pretty well under similar circumstances last year. I mean, last year it looks like a pretty good draft with Jalen Johnson, Cole Kmet, and Darnell Mooney, and maybe even Kendall Vilder. So I do like that. You've been around Hallis Hall a long time. What question I have is, Pace has been good finding those late round gems, or, whatever you want to call them, but obviously has a terrible track record in the first and second round. Why is that?
I think a lot of it is I think in part it's luck. I will not to this day hang the Kevin White pick on him, his first one, obviously 7th overall. And it was just a snake bitten career. I mean, he could never not be injured. The Mitch Trubisky thing, I think we've went over pretty extensively. We know that he screwed that one up about as badly as possible. But then you get past there. Roquan looks like a hit. He does have some second round hits too, and Eddie Goldman and Cody Whitehair. So I don't think it's been all awful. But it's such a huge, all-encompassing process. I think some of the strengths of their scouting staff lend to the day 3 guys, and you dig and you find the smaller school guys. I think that Pace's overall philosophy sometimes, where he'll value the traits over the football player, can get him into trouble. So I think there's probably a lot of different things at play there. But again, I know that to be back in the first round, to have a chance to find a guy who can come in and be a plug and play big time contributor could not come at a more important time, because as we said, the Bears, they need to have some big time success this season, and they need to get a starter on day 1. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I guess that would lead us to what they do in the first round. Obviously, they have a hole at wide receiver. They have holes, as you mentioned, at tackle, whether it's left if you want to replace Charles Leno, or right if you want to replace, at this point, nobody, because Bobby Massey's gone. And corner. The
That might be a good idea to replace that. Yeah, but might want a guy to put on the right tackle, Scott.
Absolutely. But you also don't have a quarter opposite of Jalen Johnson. So where do you go in that first round? Do you stay at 20? Do you trade up? Do you trade back?
Well, I think they're always going to be looking to gain extra picks and trade back if you can get to a spot where you're still within your same cloud of guys, as Ryan Pace likes to say. Still feel like you can hit that positional value and align it with the need. So I think that would be ideal. We've seen obviously Ryan be more aggressive, and there are more instances of him trading up. I think there's still a segment of Bears fans, guys. I don't know where you sit on this, but there's plenty of people who still want the quarterback of the future coming into the building here in 2 weeks, and Ryan Pace doing whatever he can to go up and get a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance or whomever it may be. I think at this juncture, if I'm Ryan Pace, that might be what I do, because I don't know, tomorrow's not guaranteed for me as the Bears general manager. Why does it matter what you do with the next guy's draft picks? But for the success of the 2021 season, I think they should stay away from that potential plan and then look. I think the best case scenario for them is to come out of rounds 1 and 2 with either an offensive tackle and a wide receiver, some combination. You could have, if you like the receiver first, you make sure you get a tackle or a corner second, but they got to hit 2 out of those 3 premium positions, I believe, with the first 2 picks. So we were talking a little bit. Tevin Jenkins has been a very popular name, the Oklahoma State tackle you've seen paired to the Bears a lot. I believe Kadarius Toney, the Florida wide receiver we also mentioned, has been another popular name associated with the Bears. So either of those guys would be fine when you get into the second round. I think there's going to be a lot of depth at wide receiver. So while some of these flashy first round guys are exciting, I think it might behoove the Bears to go and solidify the tackle spot. And by the way, I think Jermaine Ifedi right now is penciled in at right tackle, for better or worse. I think that when you look at Charles Leno, when you look at Leno and Ifedi together, I agree with you guys. I think when you look at Leno and Ifedi independently, they're probably both good enough to win with. You're not going to win because of them, but you can maybe win with them. I think when you pair them together, now you're talking about a combination that might be just good enough to get you beat. So you probably are looking to upgrade on one of them, likely Ifedi on the right side. And then you kind of go from there. Remember, they're in pretty good shape with Mooney and Robinson. They still need a long-term A-Rob replacement and another guy that they can fit in there to replace likely Anthony Miller. But I'm not quite as worried about wide receiver as I am about offensive tackle and corner to a lesser extent. They could be okay at corner too with Desmond Trufant. I think they probably need a nickel still.
Buster Screen was just awful last year as the nickel corner.
He didn't have I didn't think he had an awful year. I don't think he had a very good year either. I think his play with the Bears kind of declined slowly throughout his, was it 2 or 3 seasons? So they can do better. And obviously you look at a nickel now, Kevin, as your 12th starter. He's a guy who's going to be on the field a ton. And you got to really be able to rely on, like you said, maybe more than Screen kind of getting exposed more often than not.
I agree. Like, I'm not really in this. Let's give up a boatload of picks to move up for a quarterback who may or may not pan out. You look at franchises that have done well. I mean, to me, every morning I wake up, it's like, okay, how could the Bears ever be the Ravens? Well, obviously the Ravens are one of the smartest organizations around. Why? Because they get the building blocks, and they've obviously been able to maximize value for someone who's underrated, Lamar Jackson. Build around him, build around his skills, have that plan and vision. And, if you're just kind of going forward and saying, like, look, we're just going to give up a lot of picks, we're not going to be able to get those building blocks to help the person we're trading up for, I don't really see what the end game is. Right.
Yeah. And again, I mean, remember the last time that we had a coaching change here and you had the surprise trade up for a quarterback, and then you got the lame duck coach who really has no option and he has to turn to the young guy, and it becomes a lost season and it becomes a lost tenure for John Fox. So I just think that in order for this regime to make it work this year and to kind of buy themselves more time to make a bolder move like that with a longer term vision, go look at when Andy Dalton was at his best. He had Andrew Whitworth as his rock solid left tackle. He had AJ Green in his prime. They had a really good, a productive run game and a productive offensive line. So Andy Dalton's not going to raise the level of play around him. He needs the guys to prop him up. And that gets back to what we talked about, some of these other kind of ancillary needs.
Well, that just means that the offensive line really probably has to be number one, because Whitworth obviously has had a great career, obviously moving on to the Rams after his Bengals career, but he's done pretty well for himself. But that just goes to show you need not just an upgrade at left tackle, but obviously at right tackle. Even, when Ifedi got moved to tackle last year, it was pretty rough. Then when they moved him inside, once Daniels got injured, things actually worked better than I thought they were going to. So where does, to me, Jenkins, Christian Darrisaw, Samuel Cosme of Texas, you have a lot of guys that can help fill that void. Is that what they just need to do, is just get guys to fill those voids, not just for this year, but long-term, and then see what you can get later on?
I think it would be a smart approach. It's not the one that's going to excite the majority of fans the most, because it's not sexy to go out and spend your first round pick on an offensive tackle. But it's a move that can really pay dividends for you. Look, they have a logjam inside, and we talked about the non-premium positions and how they're set there. And it's nothing against Cody Whitehair is a good football player. James Daniels, who's still got a shot to be pretty good, but they have depth inside. So they don't want one of these tweeners that could be looked at, a shorter arm guy that'll be considered inside. It's got to be someone who can live on the edge. And you mentioned a couple of them there who are going to fit into this picture. I think the Notre Dame guy is going to have a chance too. Eichenberg, although he's got, I think, shorter arms. There's a couple guys who are going to be in the mix there. So we've seen, and Ryan Pace has never spent a first rounder on offensive tackle. He's spent all those picks inside. Remember, Charles Leno is Phil Emery's final 7th round pick. I know that's hard to believe, but they've gotten good mileage anyway out of him. Now it's time to go get someone with pedigree who you can kind of set it and forget it, quote unquote, hopefully for the better part of a decade.
Yeah. I think that's the first ever Ronco product that we've had mentioned on Midway Minutes. So this is a first. I mean, I'm actually pretty proud of that. That's that's good. Wideout is a big need. You mentioned the fact that Allen Robinson is, basically all he's got is a 1-year deal. Darnell Mooney played great last year, but you still don't know what you're going to get out of Javon Wims. Is Anthony Miller going to get traded? What do you have beyond that with Riley Ridley? They need a wideout bad. Beyond Tony, which we discussed earlier, do you see any other wide receivers that might be available either at 20 or for the Bears' 2nd round pick?
Yeah, I think it looks, a lot of people are talking about the Minnesota kid. Rashad Bateman is very exciting. He could potentially fit into that area, I think, at number 20. Once you get past there, you mentioned Tony is also going to be in the mix there. They're not getting one of the Alabama guys. They're obviously not getting Jamar Chase. So the big dogs are going to be gone, top 12, you would assume. I think the only two that fit into that 2nd round equation likely would be Minnesota and then also Florida. But then when you get into the 2nd round and you're talking about a couple other options, I like the Purdue guy, Rondale Moore. We talked about before the show started. I think I could see him as being a Matt Nagy guy, a chess piece who you can really scheme plays for in a variety of ways. I think both as a runner and a receiver, he would be very, very exciting. There's a couple other guys. Look in recent years, and you're finding a lot of success for teams on day 2 at wide receiver. And it looks like this year is going to be no exception. I think when you combine that with the bust rate up top in the 1st round, it makes the most sense for the Bears, unless they are in love with Bateman or Tony, and then he is in play there at 20. It probably makes the most sense to cross off one of those other needs first, and then look at a couple of these guys a little bit down the line.
Yeah. So it's been a while since Bears fans actually had something to do on in the 1st round,
right?
But it's going to take a while. They have the 20th pick. We're going to be sitting around for 2 or 3 hours before they do. As a Bears fan, how should you watch the draft unfold in front of you? What should people be looking for?
As many quarterbacks as possible. I think that, goes without saying, obviously, but there's a lot of intrigue about Mac Jones. I don't know if that's the right word. Disgust, maybe. There's a lot of confusion, I think, for some,
right,
how he could still be talked about so consistently in that number 3 spot, potentially. I go back and forth on whether that's going to happen, but I think just bigger picture, the more quarterbacks go, and you have to assume that 4 are going to be gone for sure. Well, that's going to, allow a skill player or an offensive tackle or someone like that to fall to the Bears. So that is, the most obvious kind of strategy, I think. And then I don't know, look for someone to maybe fall. There's a couple guys with some injury concerns. We know Ryan Pace has never shied away from, but other teams may, whether you're talking about a Caleb Farley, you want to replace Kyle Fuller, a Virginia Tech alum. Well, why not go get another one that looks like maybe a spitting image? He's a guy who I'm not sure would be available to them, but there are some injury concerns, and I don't know what's going on behind the scenes of these NFL buildings and what the physicals look like, but maybe a couple of these injured guys with talent that exceeds that potential fall is in play for the Bears too. I think that would be something to potentially root for here as well.
Cool. Well, I hope you enjoy the draft, and I hope the Bears come away with something. Like you said, it's even though they're not picking to 20. You're going to have to stay in. You're not going to want to stray too far from the TV or the cell phone or the mobile alerts, because there's a lot of stuff in play. And look, there's a lot riding on this, Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy's future, but also just for the Bears. We want to see them build a lasting winner. And we're always hopeful that this is the draft. It probably won't be the draft, but you never know. So.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me. I'm so excited. It's one of the most fun times of the year. And I'm just glad you mentioned Kevin, because for all the wrath that he receives, and Ryan Pace deserves a lot of it, last year was quietly exciting. You can throw Travis Gibson potentially in that mix too. It was lost in the shuffle because of the disaster on the field. But if he can put something together like that again, now you're talking, and maybe you can go out and compete. I don't think they're competing for a Super Bowl this year, but at least compete to realistically save jobs and build yourself a little bit longer timeline.
All right. I appreciate you stopping by, Art. Enjoy the draft.
Thank you. My pleasure, guys.